Agus, a pretty typical young man of 13, living on the coast of Sulawesi Utara, enjoyed his life of freedom and adventure with friends, family, and the nature that surrounded them all. Agus was a great fisherman and would help provide for himself and his mother and father by spearfishing around and in the many nooks and crannies of the beautiful mangrove forest that inhabited the shoreline near him. One afternoon, Agus was in his father's canoe and noticed a disturbance in the shade at the base of a mangrove tree. He paddled closer and saw an exceptionally large jellyfish. He recognized it as a box jellyfish, translucent and highly venomous. The jellyfish was curiously tangled in a drooping branch just above the water. Maybe the jellyfish had tried to catch something, or a wave had thrust it up into the tree. Agus was irresistibly drawn to the edge of the jellyfish, prodded and poked at the branch and tried to shake it. The body of the jellyfish was still underwater. It looked up at him and seemed to plead and actually cry out for help with a strange voice in the mind of Agus. Beyond all logic and reason, Agus slid off the side of the canoe and into the water beside the jellyfish. As he grabbed the mangrove branch and the jellyfish's tentacles, he began to get badly stung. He became imbued with some extraordinary strength to resist the effects of the jellyfish stings, despite the mind-numbing pain. In a short time, the jellyfish was free and settled into the shallow water as if recovering. Agus felt himself losing consciousness and used what little remaining strength he had to haul himself back into the canoe, where he slipped into a coma. While unconscious, Agus had a vision where he was in the water with the jellyfish, and it began to speak to him. The jellyfish thanked Agus for saving its life, and that the jellyfish had injected its eggs into Agus through his lungs, and that would in turn save Agus's life. The jellyfish went on to tell Agus that jellyfish were quite ancient, and were one of the first intelligent life forms on Earth, planted here by God to help further mutation and other processes for future advanced life forms. The venom of the jellyfish was given to jellyfish to protect them and their sacred mission. The jellyfish was allowed to survive for all the millennia, but at the huge sacrifice of not being able to come in contact with any of the creatures it had seen and helped evolve over time. However, some jellyfish still retain the genetic ability to influence certain situations, such as what Agus had just experienced. The injection of the eggs was the avenue of rescue that the jellyfish had at its disposal, and was compelled to attempt it as a repayment for Agus's kindness. What will happen to me now? Agus asked in this dream. The jellyfish told him that microscopic jellyfish would hatch and now permanently inhabit his arms and legs, and that they may or may not be able to respond to his thoughts. They might cause him pain and other symptoms, but at least he would be alive. It might also be possible that when Agus was old enough to be a father, that he might pass the microscopic jellyfish into his wife and children, and that could result in a new form of humans and jellyfish. Agus began to react severely to all of this in his coma state dream. Agus begged the jellyfish to undo this, but the jellyfish informed him that it was too late and that for now, the process must remain to help save his life. Agus was found drifting in the canoe, still in a coma. The scars on his arms and legs told the tale of a deadly box jellyfish encounter. Agus's mother and father held a bedside vigil for the comatose Agus, as a doctor informed them that the anti-venom was not being effective. As a last-ditch effort, they called upon the village shaman, who agreed to visit Agus. The shaman saw Agus and touched Agus's arm. The shaman saw clearly what was going on with Agus. Agus awakened, and in a flash, the microscopic jellyfish stung the shaman, who fell over and died within a few minutes. The death of the shaman brought much scrutiny to the household, but the death was attributed to some form of angina. Agus's parents were quite alarmed and concerned, and tried to soothe Agus as he regained his faculties. Life went on more or less normally for Agus, at least for a little while. Agus tried to accept the changes within him, like the constant discomfort of the jellyfish in his bloodstream and flesh. Anxiety and depression were all too common. Once when his mom got burned by boiling water, Agus touched her scalded hand and it got better right away. Another time, when he was swimming with friends, a shark came at them. Agus reached out his hand and the shark got stung and died. His friends were shocked and amazed, but wrote the occurrence off to the shark just being old. They were really more interested in having the shark for dinner anyhow. As time wore on, Agus began to wrestle with his fate and became more depressed and withdrawn. He saw the pretty girls in his village and was fearful that touching them might kill them, or that he might have jellyfish children, or his wife and children might become even more hazardous than himself. He began to understand what the jellyfish meant by not being able to interact with other beings. At school, Agus became the target of bullies. His past friends now began to taunt him as his behavior became more and more antisocial. One day an old friend reached out to push Agus, and Agus put up his arm to stop it. Agus began to writhe as he touched the bully's arm and face. Within 2 hours, that bully died a very, very painful death. Agus was isolated in the school office. Both his parents and the police were called. The police got there first and went into the room where Agus was sitting. After hearing the story, an officer approached Agus and grabbed his arm to take him away. The officer collapsed to the floor, gasping and bug-eyed as Agus's parents arrived. Agus ran past his parents down the street and hid in the bushes just outside his house. After his parents got home, Agus came out from his hiding spot and went in to tell them the whole story. He said he was unable to manage the situation, and to make matters worse, now he was a fugitive from the law. So for everyone's good, he must leave right away and never come back. Agus collected some food and water and a light blanket, then bid his loving parents a heartbreaking farewell. Agus knew he must return to the spot in the mangrove forest where he had met that ancient learned jellyfish. Again, he took his father's canoe and found his way along the curvy mangrove shoreline. As the afternoon began to wane, he at last found that spot where fate had dealt him this remarkable hand. Calm and peaceful the ocean was. Agus wondered how he could ever find an almost invisible jellyfish, particularly that jellyfish. Agus was distraught. He knew that, and he also knew that he might be making a mistake by even coming out to the mangroves. He just wanted to rest and maybe clear his mind a bit, so he pulled in amongst the mangroves and lashed his canoe to a tall root. As he lay there, he began to utter a prayer full of gratitude and longing. He fell asleep and had a vision of the jellyfish floating down from the sky and lashing him with his tentacles. He awoke. It was night, and he felt a strange sensation on his left leg. The jellyfish was indeed there, and some of his tentacles were over the side of the canoe, gripping his leg. Peering over the side of the canoe, Agus could see the jellyfish and the pale moonlight that was peeking from behind the clouds. "You are in trouble," the jellyfish remarked. "Yes," Agus replied. "Can you please help me? I want to be the way I was before we met." The jellyfish thought for a while, then offered Agus two options. He could hide, for years maybe, until he became more in control of the micro jellyfish interacting with his system, if that was even possible. Or he could ask the jellyfish to try and summon the micro jellyfish out of his system. That was a very chancy thing that the jellyfish had never done before, but was willing to try. In either case, the chances of success were not 100%, and in the latter case, the results could be immediately fatal. Agus chose to have the micro jellyfish expelled from his body. The elder jellyfish agreed to try, but reminded Agus, "Now you know what it's like to be unable to touch or pleasantly interact with other kinds of living beings on Earth. My wish is to restore you, but I must rely upon powers beyond my capability. I will now plead with those powers to intercede on our behalf. We have both done what we were destined to do. So be it." The jellyfish beckoned Agus back into the water, and as he slid over the side of the canoe, he could feel the pores of his skin starting to burst open in a million places. He began to thrash, shake, and writhe with pain, yet no scream emanated from his gaping mouth. The water began to glow with some form of luminescence that was tinted with the blood and shimmering with micro jellyfish now pouring out of Agus. Agus sank down, 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 and his body rested, cradled in the roots of the mangrove. The elder jellyfish attended to Agus and stroked his head. Agus opened his eyes, and their gaze met. Agus was never found. Now and again, tales are told of a very large, unusually shaped jellyfish near the mangroves, sometimes passing under small boats and canoes, or a naked boy perched on the root of a mangrove who seems to vanish into the water. Sometimes a tourist would ask the locals about strange sounds they heard out in the mangroves. The locals would shrug and say, "It's probably just a goose."